So today's daf is going to be daf Lamed, but we have a section here on daf Chaf Tes Amid Beis that we still have to finish up. So we're going to start with Boy Rabbah and backtrack a little bit. Boy Rabbah. So you'll see it's about, let's say, 20 lines down from the top of the page. You'll see a bunch of Tosas in here on Chaf Tes Amid Beis. The last one of which is Kigon. And if you drop down about 4 or 5 lines in that Tosfos Kigon, you'll see the word Rabbah. So Boy Rabbah. So what is Rabbah's suffix? Maimar lebeit Shammai nisuin osa o erisin osa. Now Beit Shammai have the opinion that Maimar is kona what's called a kinyan gomur. And the question of Rabbah seems to be, what kind of a kinyan is it? Is it a kinyan erisin or a kinyan nesuin? Amalei Abai Lamai Hilcha. So what nafkamina is there, whether you call it erisin or nesuin? Elam, if what you had in mind, Rabbah, was liyarsha, that if the Yavam performed Maimar, which is Kesef or Shtar, with the Yevamot, and then she died, he inherits her. If we assume that side in your suffix, which is Nesuin Osa, if on the other hand, Eritzin Osa, then he doesn't have rights to her Yerusha. The Yerusha goes to her relatives, her father, etc., etc. Ulatamila, let's say she dies. If it's only an Eritzin, then if he's a Kohen, he's not Mitami to her. But if on the other hand, it's Kinesuin, then the Torah says that he's Mitami. We have halach that a Baal can do a solo effort of hafaras nedarim if he's not happy with his wife's vow. But that's only after Nisuin. So if Maimer is like Nisuin, then the Baal is in the driver's seat. He'll decide whether to be made for a neder or to be Makayim the neder. If on the other hand, Maimer is ke'erisin domi, then he, the Baal, has a joint partnership over her Nidarim together with her father. So now Abai says, if this is what you're vacillating about, whether or not she's an Isua, Le'inyan Yerusha, Le'inyan Tuma, and Le'inyan Hafaras Nidarim, is Hashta Arusa Bialma. In the case of an Arusa, we're talking about a general arusa, not yibum situation, a kesef or shtar. Tani Rabbi Chia, we learned in the Brisa Rabbi Chia, each to arusa, lo onein, lo metami lo, b'chein hi lo onenes, v'hi lo metami lo, eno yarsha, mesa eno yarsha, meshu gove ksubasa. Ovad be Maimar mi boy? What kind of suffix could you have had? Asks Abaye, when all these dinim are only clinched by Nisuin. In other words, how did you entertain the possibility that through Maimar, the Yavam will be Konaha for Yerusha, and for Tumah, for Hafaras Nedarim? Why should it be any better than full-fledged Kiddushin? After all, Maimar on a Doraisa level is meaningless. It's only the Rabbanon that recognized and validated Maimar. They could have made Maimar superior to Erisin. It's the same Kesef Ushtar that he would normally give for Erisin. So in the case of an Arusa, we had the Brisa Rabbi Chia that lo onein v'lo metamila. If he's a Kohen, he doesn't bury her because it's only Erisin and not Nesuin. Nor does he become an onein. And an onein is enjoined from eating kodshim. On the flip side, she is not an onenes if her husband dies. Again, a husband after Erisin. And lo metamislo, he's not considered one of his krovim that is obligated in kvura. And there's no din of Yerusha if she dies. Now, Mace who govek subasa, govak subasa. She can collect a ksuba if he wrote her a ksuba at the time of the Erusin. And he had kavan in mind to be mischayev, to obligate himself that if he dies even before Nesuin, she'll be able to collect a ksuba. Of course, had he not written such a stipulation explicitly, then she would not be able to collect a ksuba because it's only Erusin. But in any event, in all these dinim, we see that Erusin is not enough to clinch the marriage, as far as Yerusha, Latamila, Onenes, and Ksubasa. So how can you tell me that you have a Havamina, Rabbah, that in the case of Maimar, which is certainly less on the scale, less powerful than Erusin, then she could be considered a Nesua? Doesn't make any sense. Ella, says Abaye, I have to reinterpret your question in a different light. Le'inyan mesira lechuppah, my. Now let's understand, the background here is that a normal Erusin situation, in order to get from Erusin, which is the first stage in marriage, to the final clinching stage of Nesuin, we need what's called mesira lechuppah. And that would mean that she has to agree that she wants to enter into Nesuin through chuppah. We need her intention, her approval. But here in this case, Maimar is a little bit different. Nesuin osa, one side is to say that his kinyan here is not a kinyan Erusin, but rather with Maimar, he is preparing for Yibum, which is Bia, and it's already part of the process of Yibum. It's like the first stage in Yibum. And therefore, Loboi Mesira L'chuppah. Mesira L'chuppah, which means the approval for Nesuin, is not necessary in the case of Yibum, because Yibum is even Bal Karcha, even against her will. So let's view Maimar as the beginning of the process of Yibum, and therefore there's no need for her approval to accept the Maimar. So what would be is if, let's say, after the Maimar, he would have beer with her against her will, he would be Kona her completely, and she would not need Chalitza, all she would need is a get. O Dilma, Erusin Osa. Or shall we say that since Maimar is Kesef or Shtar, it's identical to Erusin, therefore, in the next part of the process, which will complete the issues, namely the Bia, he would need her approval. Ubaya Mesira L'chuppah. Mesira L'chuppah means that she has to approve. Amalei, so Abai says to Rabbah, I don't understand your suffix over here. Hashta, here's a Kal V'chomer. Lo avid Maimar, if he had not done Maimar and he was just oil her against her will, Ksiv, Yevamot Yavoleh, Afilu Bal Karcha. So for Yibam, you don't need that. Ovid Bei Maimar Mi Boy. Now you're going to tell me that if he gave a Kesef or Shtar, the situation gets worse, and now he cannot be boil her against her will and create a full-fledged Ishus by being Mekayim the mitzvah of Yibum? It doesn't make any sense. If in the absence of Erusin, meaning of Maimar, he has the ability to be boil her Balkarcha, then how much more so in the case where he added the Maimar? Amalei. So Rabbah responds to Abai's argument. He says, in Shani Omer Kol Osa Maimar Biavimto Parcha Mimenu Zikas Yevamot Vechala Olei Zikas Erusin. My svara is, says Rabbah, that the moment that he goes down that pathway and applies the method of Kesef Ushtar through Maimar, at that moment he removes himself from Zikas Yevamot. If Kia Me'atzmo B'maisa Zez Chuso Liknos also B'Toras Yevamot, he has decided to take another path and he demonstrates that by giving up Maimar, he wants to go down the classic Kiddushin road, and therefore he will need her approval. He has given up and forfeited his powerful Zika, which allows him to do the even Balkarcha. What's the final conclusion? And that's where Baba leaves it hanging as a question. Oshma, the Gemara wants to be poached this suffix from a Mishnah Nidarim, Shomeres Yavam Bein Yavam Echad, Ubein Shnei Yevamot. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Yefer. Now we'll just explain Rabbi Eliezer on the simplest level, because actually it makes no sense, Rabbi Eliezer, but the Gemara is going to try to analyze this. Rabbi Eliezer holds that whether or not there's one single brother alive that survived his brother, the deceased, or two brothers, two Yevamim, in any event, Yafer, the Yavam could be made for the Neder. There are two Yevams. I don't know which Yavam he has in mind. Maybe he has a partnership of Hafaras Nadar. Rabbi Yeshua Omer, Li Echad V'lo L'Shnayim. If there's only one Yavam, only one surviving brother, then he has the power to be made for 100 Daran. But if there are two brothers that survived the deceased, neither of them can be made for the net. And the Gemara is going to explain this as well. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Lo Li Echad V'lo L'Shnayim. A Yavam has no rights at all for Hafaras Nedarim, even if he's the only Yavam. And now we analyze this machloka as three-way machlokas in the Mishnah Nedarim. Bishleim Rabbi Akiva Savar Ein Zika. Rabbi Akiva holds that on a Doraisa level, the Torah never recognized Zika. In other words, even if there's only one Yavam, Ein Zika, therefore he cannot be made for Nedarim. Le Rabbi Yoshua, I could even explain the din according to Rabbi Yoshua, that differentiates between one Yavam and two Yavamim, is le chad, if she only fell for even to one brother. That's all that we have. Reuven the deceased and Shimon his brother is Yesh Zika. Now we understand that there's a close connection between the Yavam and the Yavama, therefore he could be made for a Nedarim as if he were married to her. But Litrei, if there are two Yavamim, there's Shimon and Levi, and we don't know at the time of the Neder and Afara, Ishto shall be who, which Yavam is going to step up to the plate and marry her, is Ein Zika. That I can understand. You can't call it a Zika if you don't know, and there's no connection between him and one particular Yavam. So neither one of the Yavamim can be made for Nedarim. In the case of two Yavamim. Again, keep in mind that Rabbi Yeshua holds Yesh Zika, and therefore if there's only one Yavam, then he'll be made for the Nedarim as a solo effort. Elo Rabbi Eliezer, I don't understand Rabbi Eliezer. Nehinavi because of Yesh Zika. If he maintains the position that a Yavam is considered like a Baal, as if they were a full-fledged Isha, so he can be made for a Nedarim, and now Rabbi Eliezer is going to apply this even in case of two Yavamim, Bishlema Lechad Mefer, I can understand and justify that if there's only one brother, one Yavam, he could be made for a Nedarim. Elatrei, but if there are two brothers, Amai, how is it possible for Rabbi Eliezer to say, Yafer, that one of the two Yavamim is going to be made for a Nedarim? How's that possible? You have two viable candidates, two Yavamim. How can you decide to flip a coin that one of them can be made for Nedarim? You would really need that both Yavamim should be made for the Nedarim. But yet the language is Mayfair, right? That's what Yafer. Yafer is in singular. The Omer Rabbi Ami, one of these two Yavamim gave kesef or star to the Yavama, who Beit Shammai, who holds the Omer Maibar Konekin Gomel. So through the Maimar, the Yevamot becomes Ishto, and therefore he can be made for Hadadaran. He doesn't need anyone else to be made for the Daran with her. So the Gemara now analyzes, coming back to the question of Rabbah, if you're going to say that Maimer creates Nisuin Mishum Hachi who Meifir, now we understand how far is the Daran. And again, even Rabbi Akiva would fundamentally accept how far is the Daran in the case of Maimar, except for only one problem. He holds that Ein Zika. But certainly it's clear, according to Rabbi Yoshua and according to Rabbi Eliezer, both of whom maintain the Yesh Zika, that the Maimar itself creates Nisuin. Otherwise, what rights does he have to be made for Hadadaran? If you're going to tell me that Maimar equals Erisin, is Hechi Motzi Mefer Vatna Nara Murasa Viu Baila Mefirnes Nadorel. In the case of an Arusa, we have a joint partnership over an Nidaran between the father and the husband, but neither of them have sole rights to be Mefer. And now you're telling me that in the case of two Yevamot, there's a sole right, an exclusive right to be Mefer Nidarim on his own? Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, my Mefer b'shutafus enochinami. You're going to have to take the word Mefer and give it a sort of a liberal translation. We'll give you a poetic license to say that Mefer means b'shutfus, that the two of the Yevamim together. It's much like the case of a Naira Murasa, where Avia Ubaila Mefir Nidure. You need a shituf. You need a partnership of both her father and her husband. Here too, you need a partnership of the two Yevamim, which I assume means that each one has a veto power against the other one. Okay, so now we have Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak and his explanation of Rabbi Eliezer. So the Gemara now says the following. Ula Rabbi Lazar. Okay, we have to keep in mind, this is not Rabbi Eliezer, the Tana that we're dealing with in Nidaran. This is Rabbi Lazar, the Amora that we had earlier in this Masechet. The Omar Maimar lebeit Shammai Eino Koneh. It's not really a kinyan gomer, or even according to Beit Shammai. Elo litchos litzara bilvad. It means to be docha the achos hayivama who fell for yivum kemosa. So it means that the yavam cannot be mefer on his own, even if he did a maimar, because maimar is not kona a kinyan gomer, even according to Beit Shammai, according to this interpretation. Is now the Gemara asks, am I mefer b'shutfus? So we have a new interpretation here of the concept of shutfus. We thought shutfus means the two Yevamim together. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about shutfus with the father. Am I mefer b'shutfus? Right? If her status is that of an arusa, then I could understand shutfus. But her status is not even that of an arusa, because even Beit Shammai holds that ein maimer kona kinyan gomer, which means she's less than an arusa on the totem pole. And if that be the case, how does he get rights to shutfus together with the father? That only applies to an arusa, and here we don't have erusin because maimar is less than erusin. And Rabbi Losas can answer this question by saying, Eimer di'amri ano, when did I say that Maimer is not koneh, according to Beit Shammai? Elo litchos litzar bilvad. That's the lo sagi la begita. I never meant to say that Maimer doesn't generate dinim. What I meant to say is that a get would not be enough, because on a Doraisa level, she needs Yibum or Chalitza, so she has to get Chalitza. She cannot get married without Chalitza just based on a get. Ella boy Nami Chalitza. In addition to a get, she needs Chalitza. That's what Rabbi Beit Shammai is saying. And Lahafer Nedorea Mi Amrina. Did I say that as far as Hafaras Nedarim, his Maimer is not Kona? So again, it could be that Maimer is not Kona Kinyan Gomer to replace the need for Chalitza because the Torah doesn't recognize Maimer. But as far as telling me that as a result of this Maimar, if it's not a Kinyan Gomer and she'll need a Chalitza, therefore he cannot be made for Nedarim, that I never said. Even Beit Shammai could agree that he has rights to be made for Nedarim. The Ibai Sema, now the Gemara wants to offer an alternative answer to this kasha. Amar l'cha Rabbi Lazar, le Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, who holds a Maimer's Kona Kinyan Gomur, but only again a Kinyan Erisin. Mi Nicha. Do we understand the view of Rabbi Eliezer? Mi Katani, does it say Yeferu, which means that there's hafara b'shutfis between the Yevamim and the father? Yafer Katani. It only says it in Lashon Yachid. Elo, we have no choice but Hachamayaskinon she'amda b'din. So the Mishnah is talking about a case of a Yevama who came in front of Bezdin and she demanded one of the Yevamim that give a chalitza, or she should be miyabima. The Yavam refused to do so. He refused Yibum and even chalitza. Izu pasku la mizonos mishalo. Bezdin will paskin that she gets mizonos. Mishalo. Mishalo means from his property. And therefore, he could be Mefer Hanedarim, because it was already Hamada B'din. And once it was Hamada B'din, then Paskula Mizonos. Right? The Yavam now has to support her. Ukira Pinchas Mishmei Derava, the Yom Pinchas Mishmei Derava, Kol Noderes Al Das Baila Hi Noderes. The Baal could be made for Nidrei Ishto, because when she took the neder, she took it with the mindset contingent upon the approval of her husband. So when he's made for Nedarim, it's as if she didn't take the neder at all. And therefore, in terms of the das of the Yevama, who's being supported by the property and the possessions of the Yavam, when she took her neder, it was al das hayavam. And therefore, he has the koch to be mefer nedarim, even if Maimer is not kona, but it's only docha the zikas hatzara.